Today, we're diving into an absolutely epic story of national revival, and it comes to us from the book of Ezra. This is all about a community trying to rebuild everything, their home, their temple, and their very identity from the ashes of exile. But to really get the triumph, we first have to understand the despair.
So picture this. For decades, the people of Judah have been captives in Babylon. Their capital, Jerusalem, is just a pile of ruins. Their sacred temple, totally destroyed. It really seems like all hope is lost. But then something completely unexpected happens. A massive political shift that kicks off one of the greatest return stories in history.
And this incredible comeback story doesn't start with a rebellion or some big battle. No, it all begins with a shocking command from the most powerful man in the world at the time.
Now, what's so wild is who gives this order. It's not a Jewish leader. It's Cyrus the Great, the king of Persia, who has just taken over Babylon. And in a move that nobody saw coming, he issues a decree that doesn't just allow the Jewish exiles to go home, he actually charges them with rebuilding their temple.
And we're not talking about a small group here. This was a full-on mass migration. You have an entire generation deciding to leave the lives they knew in Babylon to take on this monumental task of starting over. The total number of people who made that journey was just staggering.
And Cyrus didn't just, send them off with a wave. He actually invested in their success. He returned thousands of sacred items that had been looted from the first temple, over 5,400 articles of gold and silver. This shows you it wasn't just a construction project, it was about restoring a nation's soul.
So as soon as they get back to Jerusalem, their priorities are crystal clear. The first thing they do is rebuild the altar to get their religious life back up and running. Then, once they've gathered resources and organized workers, they hit their first huge milestone. They lay the foundation for the new temple.
But here's the thing. What should have been this moment of just pure joy was, well, it was a lot more complicated than that. The sound coming from that foundation ceremony was this confusing mix of celebration and sorrow.
This moment really shows you a deep split in the community's experience. On one hand, you have the younger generation. They'd never seen the original temple, so for them, this was a new beginning. They were cheering. But then you have the elders. They remembered the incredible grandeur of Solomon's temple, and they wept because in comparison, this new foundation just seemed so humble. The sounds of joy and grief literally mingled into one noise, a perfect symbol for a people caught between a painful past and a really uncertain future.
But that internal conflict of emotions, it soon gets overshadowed by a much more dangerous external one. A really intense, organized opposition pops up, and they are determined to bring this entire project to a grinding halt.
Okay, so the local adversaries, the text calls them the people of the land, they see this rebuilding project as a threat. So what do? They launch a political smear campaign. They write letters to the new Persian king, a guy named Artaxerxes, and they spin the whole thing. They claim it's not a religious project authorized by Cyrus, but that the Jews are rebuilding a rebellious and bad city.
And you know what? Their plan worked. It totally worked. King Artaxerxes checks the imperial records and, yep, Jerusalem did have a history of insurrection. He buys the story from the accusers and issues a absolutely devastating stop work order.
And just like that, the dream was dead in the water. The adversaries march into Jerusalem, and by force and power, they make the builders stop. For years, that foundation just sat there, unfinished, a monument to crushed hope.
But of course, the story doesn't end there. After a long, frustrating delay, a new wave of prophetic inspiration and a change in leadership would finally get the project moving again.
So the history of this project was a real roller coaster of stops and starts. It kicked off with so much hope under King Cyrus, then got shut down by force under Artaxerxes, and for years nothing happened. But finally, during the reign of a new king, Darius, the prophets Haggai and Zechariah stand up and urge the leaders to defy the old order and just start building again.
This time, when a local governor questions their authority, the Jewish elders are ready. They tell him, hey, go check the royal archives for Cyrus's original decree. So King Darius orders a search, and what do you know? They find the scroll. Darius doesn't just confirm the original order, he commands the local officials to stay away and let the work happen. And then, Darius goes even further. He decrees that the whole project should be paid for out of the royal taxes from that region. And then he issues this incredibly severe threat against anyone who might try to interfere again. I mean, this was a complete 180-degree reversal of fortune for the builders.
So after decades of struggle,
political drama, and just sheer perseverance, the temple was finally finished. The dedication ceremony was this massive celebration, a moment of pure, unfiltered joy for a community that had overcome so much to see it through.
But wait, the story takes a fascinating turn here. The physical temple is rebuilt, so story's over, right? Not exactly. The focus now shifts from an external conflict about a building to a deeply personal, internal conflict about the identity of the people themselves.
Long after the temple dedication, a new figure arrives on the scene from Babylon. His name is Ezra. And he's not a builder or a governor, he's a priest and a scholar, an expert in the laws of Moses. And he shows up with the full authority of the Persian king to teach that law and basically re-establish the community's entire social and legal fabric.
Almost as soon as he arrives, Ezra is faced with a crisis. He finds out that many of the returned exiles, including priests and leaders, have married women from the surrounding nations. Now, for Ezra, this is an absolute catastrophe. It threatens the core idea of the holy seed, this belief that they were a people set apart by their covenant with God.
And Ezra's reaction is visceral. He tears his clothes, pulls out his own hair, and just sits there, stunned, before collapsing in a public prayer of confession. His profound, visible grief is the catalyst. It shows the people just how severe he believes the situation is.
Moved by Ezra's prayer, the community agrees to a really radical and honestly painful solution. They make a new covenant with God to fix the problem. And the process is very systematic. Everyone gathers in Jerusalem, they all agree to separate from their foreign wives, and then commissions are set up to investigate every single case over several months. This was a difficult, heartbreaking decision, but it was all aimed at redefining the boundaries of their community.
And this all leads us to the story's final, challenging question. The book of Ezra shows us that rebuilding a nation is about way more than just stone and timber. After the physical structure was done, the much harder work began, defining who they were as a people. What does it truly mean to rebuild a nation? It's a question of identity that communities, even today, continue to wrestle with.